I'm basically homeless. Right, let's stop the transcription. Right, let's have a glance at Learning Unit 5. There are a couple of things that we have to look at. First of all, the importance of the macro environment, in particular, now with what is happening in the Middle East, and in particular with the fact that the blockade on the biggest oil route in the world is in place. I saw something today that the Iranians are now threatening, unless the Americans remove the blockade, they are going to start attacking ships in the Red Sea. It is an absolute disaster zone. The other thing that worries me is how it just smacks of market manipulation, because you see that whenever there's a bit of good news, there is insane amounts of trade. It spikes ridiculously, which is only inside trade. So those are obviously people in the know, realizing that Donald Trump is going to say something positive that will buy shares, will dump this, etc. So the key thing in terms of this, why did this now default back here? Oh my gosh. Okay, how's it, Sepang? Right. And then we'll also spend a bit of time looking at the elements in this environment, and then also just this idea of how to do the analysis. I think the reality is that part of what makes a successful organization is your ability to be able to predict, to be able to check trends, to be able to analyze and suggest what might happen in the future. The scary part of it, though, is that the world has become so incredibly unpredictable that I don't even know how people have these kinds of planning processes in place. I mean, I get the impression everyone is reacting as things happen. Right, let's have a glance at this. Right. So when we look at the external environment, I mean, in the external environment, we find our opportunities and threats. And I think the key thing about this environment is that it's beyond our control. However, we've seen that through certain maneuvers, you have some sort of control over the environment, lobbying with politicians. There are a variety of things that you can do. But generally, you are the victim of what happens in the external environment. The one good thing is that if you get it right properly, you should be able to anticipate and deal with those potential changes in the environment. So the bridge between the environment and the organization is information. So the general rule of thumb in terms of information is that we start off with data. We look at what data is out there. We try and figure out from that data what we can use in terms of the organization. So from there, we organize the data and we turn that data into what we would have as information. If we do this incredibly well, we turn that information into competitive intelligence. So you'll hear the term competitive intelligence, and I was a little bit surprised that we didn't have a question on competitive intelligence in the assignment. But competitive intelligence is information structured in a way that will give us a competitive advantage. And AI plays a significant role in this aspect of an organization. So I think the reality is once we've got to competitive intelligence, decisions can be taken. The kind of guesswork is taken out of making these decisions, although there is a lot of flying by the seat of our pants. The world is unpredictable, guys. The world is insane. The scariest thing to try and watch is to watch the news or to have a news feed about what is happening in the world. The world is in an unhealthy state, and we are really, really concerned that we are heading towards a worldwide recession, which has significant consequences. So, can I quickly ask, in your own capacity, what have you done to try and just potentially cope with these changes that are going to come in the environment? In particular, what have you done in terms of looking at dealing with the oil prices and the consequences of shortages that are going to follow? Who's done anything about it? I know some organizations have offered to their employees that they can have work from home, very similar to the way they did during COVID, because traveling and it's become impossible if there's no fuel. I know in places like Sri Lanka, in a couple of the Asian countries, work from home is now a reality until the oil prices come down, until the supply goes up. Anything that you've done in your personal capacity? Who has done the hoarding thing? Bought a deep freeze and stuck a lot of stuff into the deep freeze so that when yeah, things get really expensive, that you're trying to mitigate those risks? Or are we just waiting, going month to month? Anyone do anything out of the ordinary in terms of dealing with what's going to happen to the oil supply and price? I think you guys are a bit like me.
I
You
think
know,
the current reality is that a lot of people in this country are living month to month, so there isn't that additional revenue to go out and splash and fill up your deep freeze.
that is 100% the problem. So we are going to fall victim of the fact that, first of all, living in South Africa is expensive. Secondly, it is very difficult to save. We have a negative savings culture in South Africa. So when you have negative savings, it means you spend more than you actually earn. And that's why we have this magic thing set in a yeah, Jen, I did the same thing. I'll be honest with you, but that petrol's run out, so I had to go and fill up today. I had to go fill up today because there will be another increase on, oh my gosh, in about 15 days' time. But my car was dead empty. We have a negative savings culture where people spend more than they earn. And obviously, we're through the magic of a credit card. I mean, I've had friends who had multiple credit cards, and they do a bit of a kite flying thing that you pay one credit card with the other. And I think you've got to know what you're doing. But I think you're 100% right, Alan. I'm sorry, Dean. You're 100% right. It's not that easy for most South Africans to go in full deep freezers. So if we look at how we describe this environment, it is the VUCA environment. So the first one is we deal with volatility, and the volatility is about the speed of change. It is how rapidly this environment is changing. It is the significant pace of change. I think about 10 years ago, I started hearing about AI. My son had started doing a qualification in artificial intelligence, but it was a bit of pie in the sky, and I didn't understand exactly how it would work. And initially, I suppose I thought it would be about a glorified Google, and it's certainly a lot more than that. And the pace of change in AI is absolutely insane. Give me other examples of industries that have just sped up in terms of how quickly the changes take place. Other industries that have just sped up in terms of the rapid nature of the change. The one that always stands out for me, guys, is the car industry. If you see the technologies in cars now and what 10 years ago would have been exclusive to incredibly expensive cars as standard in modern vehicles, the technology we find in vehicles is absolutely insane. Other industries where we've seen this rapid pace of change, the industries where we've had this significant pace of change. And obviously, AI is going to be one of those. And I think in terms of what our phones can do nowadays, our handheld devices, and where we are going in terms of handheld devices in the future. Banking has changed for me as well. I believe banking is rapidly evolving all the time, and new options in terms of banks as well, the time bank type alternative. Anyone here part of time bank? It's TYME Bank. Yeah, if you ever get a chance, have a glance at Time Bank. It's owned by Patrice Motsepe, and it's an interesting way of banking. My brain can't actually process how it works. My brain cannot get its head around how that works. The second one is uncertainty. It's very difficult to predict what will happen next week, let alone in a year's time. I think for me, Donald Trump is a significant contributor to uncertainty. I shudder to think what that man will do next. Silly things like having a fight with the Pope, another silly thing depicting himself as Jesus Christ. It's healing somebody with the celestial light appearing from his hands. I think he is a significant player in bringing uncertainty. What are the other contributors to uncertainty other than the Trump factor? And I'm sorry if you're a Trump supporter. I really believe he is the single most dangerous person in the world today. Other factors contributing to uncertainty?
Well, I think he's caused most of them.
Well, that's the reality. I mean, he's caused most of them. I mean, the fact that South Africa seems to be a pariah in this person's eyes. The fact that during the next G7 meeting, South Africa was uninvited because Trump refused to go if South Africa went. I can't believe that people can be that weak to uninvite a member of the G7. I mean, what gives that person the right? And I don't know what his issue with South Africa is. I think he seems to believe that white people are being hunted on the streets, which is absolute rubbish. The so-called how dangerous it is to be white in South Africa. I think it's dangerous for everyone. Any other uncertainties, guys? Uncertainties in South Africa. And there are significant uncertainties that will come out of this particular event. There will be significant uncertainties. Go for it,
Well, it's
Dean.
obviously driven by fuel price and food prices and whether people are going to be working from home and not traveling, or we don't know what's going to happen, where it's going. That's
You
creating a
don't
lot
know.
of uncertainty.
And you add into that the elections. The ANC will be under 30%. The prediction is in terms of votes received, and who fills the difference? Are we going to default to MK, which I live in KwaZulu Natal, and they took 40% of the vote during the previous municipal or the previous elections? And then who is going to take over from Cyril Ramaphosa? Because the truth is, and if you're an ANC supporter, well, really and truly, the truth remains the truth, that it's the rogues gallery in terms of who potentially will replace them. They've all got criminal charges against them. And then, where does the EFF go, who has disappeared completely, who will represent the poor? There is so much that we have to deal with. And the DA, who tends to believe that they are the future, which, it's great to be an opposition party. It's very difficult to run an actual country. Guys, and then just complexity. Yeah, the complexity for me is how interconnected elements are in the world. When we look at complexities, the first thing I always remember is that you cannot predict what will happen next. So if we just look at this Gulf War situation, out of the blue, Trump attacks and Israel attack um, Iran. Iran does what they can do. They hit the world with their economic weapon and they close the Strait of Hormuz, or they make it very difficult for ships to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. Trump counters that by blocking completely the strait. Now nothing goes through. Now we see that Iran are saying that, well, we're going to now start attacking ships in the Red Sea, or they're going to take the war to the Red Sea. The connectedness is so so unique that it's very difficult to sometimes see where one change will knock on in terms of its effect. And it's ambiguous. We don't have enough information. I think the biggest thing in terms of the war is the appearance of the lack of planning and making it up as we go, as things evolve. I find that very, very strange.
Like watching someone play Minecraft.
Well, it is. It is. I mean, where does it go? So, guys, in terms of the different factors, I'm not going to go into detail through these. The political, legal, we know that it is about laws. It's about, in South Africa now, what will happen after the next elections. And I think the municipal elections is next, or can't even remember. Economic factors, the one thing in 1996, we were told that South Africa has the potential to grow at 6% a year. And if we grow at 6% a year, we will address all our unemployment levels by the year 2006. We've never, ever been able to grow at that. And we have the record at this point to have one of the highest unemployment levels in the world. So all of these things have a significant impact. And then just social factors in terms of changes in values and lifestyle choices, etc. And then also the technological factors with AI driving a heck of a lot of what is happening in the world now. And then changes in legislation. We constantly are bombarded with new pieces of legislation. If you could add one piece of legislation to our lineup of legislation, what would that legislation be? One law. In the ideal world, if you can create your own law, what would that law be? And one of the laws that I know is being spoken about is to ban under 16s from social media completely. Um, that definitely is something that's on the cards. I don't know how far we are away from it, but we have seen in other nations how that has become law. The laws, guys, that you would love to see added to the lineup of laws? Rivaldo, Leo, is it Leo? I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Ross, anything you guys would add to our existing laws? Go for it, Dean.
An open economy with free trade.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. In that essentially would be a wonderful idea. Yeah. Other laws that you would add to our lineup. If you could take away one law, what would it be?
BEE.
Yeah, BEE. I have a lot of people say that the smoking law needs to be relaxed. I'm a non-smoker and a never smoker, so can't comment on that. I also would introduce a law that bans vaping. I certainly think vaping is as dangerous, if not, they're not more dangerous than cigarettes. I feel like Dean and I are doing all the talking. And then the natural environment, guys. Yeah, I think if at this point we don't realize that climate change is something that is very real, that the impact is very significant, that the idea of melting ice caps and rising sea levels and the knock-on effect in terms of how that affects where people will live, how people will grow, that is for me one of the biggest creeping crises that people have ignored. And then also you have the naysayers, including Donald Trump and some very bright people that I work with who believe climate change is a hoax. Anyone want to put themselves in that camp, believing that climate change is a hoax? What is the biggest fear you have about climate? Go for it, Dean.
The funniest thing I remember is during COVID, during lockdown, the weather was absolutely incredible and there were
Yeah,
butterflies everywhere.
yeah.
and you don't see that anymore.
You don't. I mean, I live in Pietermaritzburg. We had antelope running up one of the main roads in Pietermaritzburg, coming to look what's happening because the drone of manufacturing had disappeared. Fish returned to to rivers that they hadn't been in hundreds of years. I mean, in particular in Venice, there were fish all of a sudden in the canals. I mean, very different. Almost that Mother Earth took a bit of a break. I think the reality, though, is that as a creeping crisis, we have got to a point where we need to start taking some serious decisions. I've shared this with you previously, guys. For me, this is my default setting every single time. This to me is the way you do any pestle analysis. If I had to do a facilitation thing with a company, I would put this up when we do our pestle analysis. And then,
Sorry,
yeah,
sir.
yeah, go for it, JD.
I actually just thought of a law that I would like to add.
Okay.
My law would be to ban littering
Yeah,
because
that
I
would be a
hate
wonderful
people
law.
that litter.
Yeah, yeah. And the worst thing for me
100%.
is, yeah, when you tell people that, don't litter, the attitude is, well, by littering, I'm creating jobs. I don't know if anyone's heard that absolute insane argument. By littering, we create jobs. I'm going, what the hell
That's
are you thinking?
awful.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I quite
no,
like that.
there's a few times where I like reported there was a bus driving in front of me, and I reported the bus because I saw someone throw something out on like the main road. And
Yeah.
there was also once when I was little, even there was someone who threw something out of their car, but I was walking and I picked up that litter and I threw it back in that person's car. And my dad was like, "You can't do that. You don't know what the person will do." But I just got so upset that they just threw it out of the window without any care.
Very, very cool. Very nice, JD. Very nice. So, in terms of international factors, so obviously part of this would be globalization. Unfortunately, we see significant anti globalization movements now. Give me examples of anti globalization movements where we've had specific strategies that fly in the face of globalization. One happened, must be 10 plus years ago now. It involved the UK. Remember, Brexit certainly was one of them. Trump in Make America Great Again was another. The other one, which I think will have significant consequences going forward, is that China have indicated that they are going to become fully self-sufficient in terms of their own supply chain, in particular in technological fields. So they are setting themselves up that they can isolate themselves completely by becoming fully self-sufficient. So they'll still export, but they will not be bringing in items and components from elsewhere. It is a significant move for the future because China will be self-sufficient and they will be the biggest economy in the world. Other international factors, guys, that is worth taking note of at this point. What do you think will happen to Trump after the midterms in November? Is there a chance that he'll be impeached? I believe if the midterms take place, I believe if he doesn't find a way of blocking the midterms, he will be impeached in January. That is my prediction. But it all hinges on whether the midterms will take place because every seat that used to belong to the Republicans in whenever it became vacant in every by-election has gone to the Democrats. Staunch Republican areas have gone to the Democrats. And I think if this person allows, and that's a big if, the elections to happen, he will not be in power very, very soon. Okay, guys, and then just the knock on effect for that. for me would be very positive. So when we look at the macro analysis, so the focus here is to make predictions about the future so we can create strategies to position the organization effectively for the future. So in terms of your strategic analysis, I think the first thing is the realization that it's a continuous analysis. It is not a once-off event. And that's what often the problem is when you do a strategic plan, because strategic plans tend to be a once a year thing where you take people into a room somewhere, or you take them out into a bush camp somewhere, and they do the strategic plan. They write a wonderful vision or review the vision, write the mission statement, and do the rest. That is not what it's about. I think the key thing is this is ongoing. It is constantly having your ear to the ground. And I'm sure we've discussed this. There is a term, and my apologies, because I'm now going to paint and I'm doing this with a mouse. But it's the horizon watching activities. I think anyone who's ever sat at the beach and looked into the distance, you'll often see specks appear in the distance. And as those specks get closer, you can see what type of ship it is, what type of boat it is, etc., etc. And the reality is, companies that are very good at horizon watching activities are able to predict what events are coming in their direction. And that is what makes an organization potentially gives them the ability to be proactive. So, guys, we need both quantitative and qualitative data. Quantitative data will be stats and numbers and facts. Qualitative data is where you go ask for people's opinions, whether it's through having subject matter experts, meetings with subject matter experts, whether it's a Delphi technique, but certainly you want to get opinions, and you want opinions from people who have their ear to the ground. If you have to trust one person in your organization to tell you what potentially will happen in the future, who is that person in your organization, or what position do they hold from a qualitative perspective? Remember, in terms of data, it's management dashboards and all of those things. What is the one person who is the one person you would turn to involve in making predictions about the future? Who is the most financial manager? So very attuned to what's happening in the world. Anyone else? Anyone here think they should be approached? Clinton, do you reckon it should be you? Oh gosh, did Clinton run away? You're in the middle now. I love that answer, bud. Oh, that was so good. Yeah. And I also think part of that is that it becomes the input into your decisions. Oh, Motimekwane, you unmute yourself, boy. Okay. We do this again. Like, go away, bugger. So in terms of how we go about this analysis, it is the scanning. It is the horizon watching activities. It is talking to experts. It is having data. One of the things, and now that I've done this, I'm now going to regret it, that big companies do is they have something called an information cockpit. And it looks exactly like the front of an airplane. And down the walls, you've got TVs and monitors and computers, etc., that essentially keep an eye on every single aspect of the world and does it in real time. So a person can walk into this information cockpit and at a single glance can tell you what is happening in the world right now, what we should be concerned about, what we should pay attention to. It is literally just a room filled with monitors and computers and TVs. I mean, running every single channel potentially possible in this particular room. And then it's the monitoring, and it's making sure that if there are signals out there, um, one of the things we try and do is amplify whatever weak signals there are, those little smokes that happen and where that potentially might impact the organization, trying to create meaning of what that thing would do to the organization. And then, guys, yeah, other things that we do forecasting, and we try and predict the likelihood of an event. So, the likelihood of a deal being reached between Iran and America, um, yeah, the previous agreement took 5 years to negotiate, involving a variety of technical experts. Now we've got 7 people, 3 from America and 4 from Iran, going to sort it out in a few days. If there's a deal, it's going to be very, very surprising for it to happen. And if you can predict a deal, then obviously it starts changing your approach in terms of what you're looking at from a business perspective. And you need to assess. You've got to assess the meaning of what is happening in the world, what feedback you're receiving from the environment, and then asking the question, how likely is this event going to impact us? And if it impacts us, how big an impact will it have? Does it have the potential to cause the organization to potentially close down? I mean, fall into crisis. So there are a variety of things that go hand in hand with a macro environmental analysis. I think the first one is you acutely aware of information about the world. You're acutely aware of events and things that are happening that will impact the organization. You then also are able to take those and look at opportunities and threats. A significant threat now is the oil price, is petrol prices, is the shortage. How people mitigate for that, I don't know. I regret not having gone solar, and I regret, had I gone solar, I possibly, much against my own brain, would be driving an electric vehicle. Anyone own an electric vehicle at this point? No one. Yeah, I wish I did. I wish I had solar and I had an electric vehicle. And then just also, you would look at those things that impact your strategic choices. It's about insights in the world, guys, and it allows us to look at situations and make sense of situations. And it allows us to determine how big these changes will impact our organization. It allows us to know what our competitors are doing, and it allows us to get ready and have the resources in place to benefit and counteract whatever is happening in the environment. Yeah. So limitations. I think the first one is it's about those individuals that make the predictions and their own profile from a risk perspective, and then also the uncertainty. A lot of people love living in ambiguity. These are individuals that will race into the mist and not slow down. I quite like the idea of knowing what will happen next. And then just also, one of the things that limits us in making predictions about the future is our own imagination. The reality is our own imaginations, and over time, I believe people's imaginations have died down, and we've replaced it with technology. But our own imaginations prevent these predictions. And then also the way corporations plan. We have organizations that will plan and plan and plan and plan and plan and will never create anything, and then essentially will go and run by the seat of their pants. And then also there are a variety of techniques, but none of them are perfect. What AI does, and I think we need to give some sort of acknowledgement for AI. AI is able to track millions and millions and billions of data points. AI is able to take those data points and make sense of them and make predictions around what will happen. So AI will play a significant role going forward in terms of what organizations use to make predictions. The problem, though, is you can have the best AIs in the world, humans still will have the ability to decide whether they're going to follow a particular strategy. Guys, and then just also what we have to look at. I think the first one is always look at every potential influence, every potential eventuality. The world is so interconnected that one event somewhere could have such a knock-on effect that we could never predict where that knock-on effect is. Please just help me whether I've used this example previously. The example of the volcano exploding in Iceland. Have I used that example? The volcano exploding in Iceland. Anyone recognize that?
Not to my knowledge.
No.
Thanks, guys. In 2010, a volcano exploded somewhere in Iceland. This is my attempt at a drawing of the volcano, and it went boom. Okay. I can't pronounce it because it doesn't have any vowels. So this volcano exploded. This volcano caused an ash cloud to settle over Europe. The ash cloud settled over Europe, and those of you that are, in your cities and above, you'll remember this event. If you're younger, this will be a bit blurry. An ash cloud settled above Europe. The ash cloud prevented aeroplanes from taking off in Europe for a long period of time. Those aeroplanes not taking off impacted fruit and flower packers in Cape Town. Sorry, that's my attempt at Table Mountain. A mountain exploding several thousand miles away resulted in fruit and flower packers in Cape Town getting retrenched. Now, just imagine that connect, that we have this ridiculous event resulting in fruit and flower packers being retrenched in Cape Town. No one could stretch their imagination that far. I certainly couldn't stretch my imagination. Any comments about that? Where have we seen other similar issues where a crisis had a knock-on effect that literally no one could have predicted the outcomes in terms of wherever it impacted? Anyone want to comment about this? I mean, for me, always, how do you tell an unsophisticated person who won't have a matric, who is a flower and fruit packer, that the reason you've lost your job is because a mountain exploded in the distance? My brain doesn't process this. And unfortunately, this is what happens. It's very difficult to make these kinds of connects. And I also think the reality is it's never there to crystal ball it. It's certainly not about a crystal ball prediction. Oh my gosh, Jen, absolutely. Chernobyl. I mean, first of all, who could have predicted Chernobyl and the knock-on effect, and the knock-on effect still being felt? Guys, and then just it allows you to be proactive, and then also realizing that you have to understand this process in order to be able to translate some of the elements into tactics in the organization. And then, yeah, it allows us to adapt to and learn from the environment. But it is the ear to the ground. Chernobyl is a wonderful example. I mean, the knock-on effect in terms of what happened there. And it is a long-lasting effect. I mean, what is the half-life of it? Isn't it something like 30,000 years or something, or 3,000 years? I'm not sure exactly about how long the half-life is. So in terms of our strengths, from there we can do a SWOT analysis. Who has been part of a SWOT analysis in their business? Part of a SWOT analysis. Have you done that before, Dean? Do you think it's accurate ever?
I ran the plumbing market share forum, and we were actually very successful after A lot of people in the business said that we're never going to turn this plumbing thing around. They've tried too many times, and we did. So we actually used that,
Very
and it
cool.
was quite
Very cool.
successful. Yes.
Oh, that's very cool. Yeah. So strengths and weaknesses, opportunities and threats. Who's ever done a SWOT analysis for themselves? If you could do a SWOT analysis for yourself, what would be your strengths? Mine is my hair, so I obviously have to put that out there right now. I've got hopefully a little bit more than just a hairstyle, guys. It is a heck of an interesting thing. In particular, if you're at a change in career, or if you're fed up with your job, if you are looking for a change in job, do a SWOT analysis. You will be surprised at what you will learn about yourself. It is a wonderful, wonderful career planning thing. And I think the most important one is that sometimes we are blind to opportunities that are there because we've never sat down and looked at the combination of elements in terms of opportunity. And then also look at what threats there are out there. And it could be anything from an industry dying. But you one day need to do a SWOT analysis for yourself. I would love to hear, if you attempt this, a bit of feedback. It is a wonderful exercise, in particular in career building. And a lot of you are very young and at early stages in your career. Shob, is that a picture of you or Ayrton Senna? Shob? Okay, maybe Shob will answer me now. Okay, and we know what a pestle analysis is. I showed the picture of that. And then just other things to look at. Yeah, be very careful that this isn't an exam question, guys. Be very careful. I would envy this already for the exam. They love throwing this in. And it's the issues priority matrix. So it's about avoiding strategic myopia. Now, myopia is obviously short sightedness, and it really is that technique that allows us to include all the information we can get, including stuff that doesn't fit our own sort of plans. So, what we do in terms of this matrix is that, first of all, we look at those critically important potential events and developments in the macro environment. And you list those. So you look at what potentially will happen going forward. And remember, one of those is what is happening in the Gulf right now. Once you've done that, you will look at certain trends that come out of the environment. So trends in terms of where technology is going, trends in terms of where AI is going, patterns that essentially are out there and how those have evolved over time. I mean, think of online stores, for example. No one really thought that online stores would be anything massive 16 years ago. And now every single company has one, and how those stores have evolved and will continue evolving. And then you would look at trying to figure out these events that we've anticipated, how likely will these take place? So essentially, is this definitely going to happen, or this may be happening, but we're not too sure about the likelihood of that. And then you look at each of those events and you ask yourself the question: if this event happens, how big an impact will it have on the organization? Please have a look at 165.2. It is a very clever way of prioritizing and acknowledging those events that will impact the organization. And then the next one is scenario analysis. So when we look at scenario analysis and planning, the way it works is this. So let me finish this out again. You don't say. So if I were to do scenario planning right now, so at this point in time, Okay. I would have certain things that would form part of the scenario. So I would have a high road and a low road. In the high road, I would say that the war is resolved in the Gulf. So we fix what is going on and we have the free flow of traffic. If that happens, we will have oil flowing through. We will get the supply up over time, and prices and inflation will go down. If the war doesn't stop, the knock-on effect is significant. The scenario depicts a world that goes into recession. For me, another scenario, and I would have this as a scenario planning, is that what happens after the mid-years, and I'm sorry to harp on Trump, but this man has such an impact on the world. I would have a scenario on what happens after the mid-year elections. And I would have a high road that Trump gets impeached and whatever happens as a consequence of that. And I'd have a low road that Trump stays in power for another 2 years. The impact would be quite dire for the world. And then when you do a scenario analysis, I think the first thing is it's about the future. You look at those elements in terms of what you will have your scenario around. You look at your uncertainties and you look at those driving forces. So, one of the things that we see in scenario planning is we have these triggers. If this happens, then we know that we're in this particular scenario. So, if Trump gets impeached, we will know that we are in the high road scenario, which allows us to anticipate that South Africa would be allowed back to the G7, that South Africa would lose the potential of all the tariffs against us, and. So you already know that if that single event occurs, that these are the likely events that will follow. And then, yeah, you look at those outcomes, you ask yourself the question, what have I missed? What more can I put in? And then just getting everyone in the organization to realize that we need to be aware of these events. If this happens, then the other events will follow. It is a wonderfully powerful way of managing the future. And then key in terms of your scenarios, it is about relevance to the organization. It has to make sense. So internal consistency means that if Trump here gets impeached, then everything else must be positive for South Africa. If Trump stays in power, there will be a number of negative consequences for business in South Africa. And it must be archetypal. So, archetypal means these are opposites. That would be my high road. This would be my low road. And you'll see as the events happen, those would indicate that the next event likely to happen will be whatever follows on that high road or low road. And essentially, you should realize that sometimes that you want to commit yourself to that particular set of events, the high road or the low road, for a long period of time. Sure. Timing is not so shabby. Any questions, any comments at this stage, guys? I will stay behind tonight if you want